Well, I see you as playing a critical role in defining what is and what isn't, what still needs to be determined in terms of this landscape and the entire landscape, really, of nutrition.
And that study did change my opinion in terms of, okay, I think we can clearly say now that like these aren't neutral, or sorry, that they're not inert, right? Like that was the thought process before, was, well, they're not digested or whatnot, so they must be inert. That doesn't appear to be the case. But again, like when we look at the blood glucose data, and I'm not saying this is what happened. I want to be very clear. I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm saying it's possible this happened. And so this is why we need more studies to verify. If these people had a preconceived notion that artificial sweeteners were bad for them, it's possible, knowing they're ingesting artificial sweeteners, that they could have had a blood glucose response. Now, my pushback on my own point there would be, then we should have expected to see it in all the non-nutritive sweeteners, which they didn't. It was just in sucralose and saccharin.
Yeah, it was kind of a graded effect where sucralose and saccharin showed the most dramatic change.
Yep.
And stevia and a few of the others did not.
And the other issue I took with it, maybe it's a ticky-tack thing, was their primary outcome measure was blood glucose, so the oral glucose tolerance test. But they had people administer their own oral glucose tolerance tests, which basically they said, okay, drink this drink, and they were wearing continuous glucose monitors, which should have been fine. But again, to me, and I'm being ticky-tacky, and again, I know all studies are limited by funding, so I think overall this was a great study. But I would have liked to have seen them, monitor the oral glucose tolerance test
and
to administer it
before or after. Right? Yeah. You want to know that they didn't ingest this or did ingest that. Yeah.
Those two things. But the one other caveat is it was a 2-week study, right? So we got to be really careful how much we interpret in this, because it's also possible that this is a transient effect, right? And maybe it goes away over time. We don't know. But again, I think we can clearly say it's not inert, right? Now, how much emphasis we put on that on a 2-week study, I still will say, okay, maybe if you're worried, don't consume sucralose, right? But if you're, 100 pounds overweight and you want to use some sucralose as a replacement to help you lose weight, I would say don't let this study deter you from doing that, because the net effect is still going to be more positive than you not losing the weight, right? So if it's a tool that helps you, fine. But I do hold open the idea that, well, there could be negative effects from it as well. But again, we're looking at like what is the overall outcome, right? And then when I looked at, they examined like some of the different things that were increased with these different sweeteners. And again, this is where it gets messy, because one of the things they saw was a big increase in butyrate production from the change in the gut microbiome, presumably. Well, as we discussed earlier, butyrate's actually associated with like positive outcomes in terms of insulin sensitivity, inflammation, and some other things. So I want to be real cautious before people say, well, there's a change in the microbiome, it must be a bad change. We don't know. It's possible. And again, if we have, 10 more studies come out and start to show this, then I will start to shift my personal opinion of artificial sweeteners.